Let's take out our Bibles and learn together.
There's a term in the book of Revelation that has caused much confusion and also has been a basis to try to justify anti-Semitism by so-called believers. This term appears twice, once in Revelation 2:9 and the second time in Revelation 3:9. In that section that speaks about the 7 congregations of Asia Minor. And the term I'm speaking of is a synagogue of Satan. Now, let me just simply point out a few things. At this time, when John was writing the book of Revelation, we do not see that believers were being persecuted by other Jewish individuals, but rather we see the persecution was from Rome. So it was not Jewish people persecuting Jewish believers and non-Jewish believers, but it was Rome, a Gentile empire that was very opposed to this faith in Israel's Messiah. We see that John wrote these words on an island called Patmos. And what was he doing there? The scripture says he had been exiled there. And who exiled him to that place? Not Israel, but again, the Roman Empire. Now, we need to realize something. The term synagogue, today people hear that and they immediately think of a Jewish house of worship. This is not what one should do. We need to realize that the term synagogue is a Greek term simply meaning to come together. And a synagogue traditionally is simply a place that people gathered like a community center or a town hall. It was only in Israel there were synagogues from the Greek Empire all over Europe and the Middle East and such. But it was only in Israel, primarily on 2 days during the week, on Mondays and Thursdays, which were market days, that the synagogue, which was a community center used for a variety of different purposes. And we see that on Mondays and Thursdays, when the market was going on, at that time, there was an interruption. And those of a religious faith, Judaism, would gather there on Mondays and Thursdays so the Torah could be read, because on Shabbat, not everyone could make it to a place where the Torah was read to hear the reading of the Torah. So we hear synagogue and we immediately think something that's related to the Jewish community. That shows a poor understanding of history. Once more, a synagogue was simply a community center. That name was used, not just in Israel, but all over the Greek Empire. And of course, now we're not talking about the Greek Empire, but the Roman Empire. But the term stayed. Why? Because the Greek language had a strong hold on much of the world because of the influence of Alexander the Great. So when we talk about a synagogue of Satan, and you think, oh, a Jewish place of worship. No, what we should see is a type of administrative building. And what we find, and this is certainly keeping with the context, it was the Romans who used such facilities in order to administer this area. And it was the Romans at the time of John in late 1st century that was persecuting Christians. Check the history, not the Jewish community at this time. The Jewish community had their own problems because of Roman persecution, not just on Jewish believers and other believers, but on the Jewish people very harshly at this time. Remember that the Romans had already destroyed Jerusalem and the temple approximately 20 years earlier. Then we have the term Jew. Now, first of all, it says in both of these passages that they proclaim to be Jewish, but they're not. That says something. Now, many people wrongly interpret it, meaning there's been a replacement. They think they're God's people, but no longer are they. We have replaced them. And therefore, because we have replaced them, we now can persecute them. That's how many people and many of the reformers thought. It is a wrong way of thinking. The term Jew, if you look at it in the book of Genesis, when the child was born who had the name Yehudah, we learned something. This is a term of giving thanks, one of throwing praise and adoration to God. So it's simply saying these individuals that meet in the administrative building, those who are part of the Roman Empire, its leadership locally in places, they were persecuting believers. And because of that, those administrative buildings known as synagogues, but not houses of worship for Jewish people, but governmental offices of Rome. The believers saw that their persecution was not just coming from individuals. Remember, our warfare is spiritual, not against flesh and blood. So they would call these places the synagogue of Satan. They thought that they were doing service to their God. They thought that they were really praising God by persecuting believers. But this is not the case. So when we look at this phrase that appears, as I said, twice in the Bible, Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9, it is not a statement against Jewish people, but those who think they're serving God, those who think they are giving honor to God by what they're doing, but in actuality, they're not. They're not praisers of God. That's literally what the term Jew means, a praiser of God. These were not praising God. Rather, they were servants of Satan doing his work. And their buildings were called, that gathering place, a synagogue of Satan. So let's be people that do a little research and understand the terms rather than being lazy and just dealing with things on how we think based upon a very limited historical perspective. We need the whole picture, and then we might come away with a very different opinion. Well, I'll close this short message at this time until our next Revelation short. May God bless you. Shalom from Israel.